Here's, you can see across the state, one of the big problems. That's our enrollment for the state of Montana. Since 1991, you can see it is continually going down. The last data I found was 208. That's about a 6.5% decrease. In Thompson Falls, we've been more like a 33% decrease in losing approximately 220 students. So when you see the enrollment go down over the state, they do not have to give us one dime, and they give us an increase per student. So that's how statistics, you really got to understand what they're saying. The enrollment's going down, they can still give us $1, but because the enrollment going down, they can say they're giving us more per student. So when you read that, read between the lines. And that's how they're balancing a lot of the budget right there, is with the decrease in students in Montana. A and B, average number belonging. In the olden days, that used to be average daily attendance. And then in some states across the country, when you see that, they actually pay their students to come to school. 2 bits a day, $1 a day, and they give them a check because they're paid on their attendance. Not enrollment, but attendance. Montana used to be like that. They changed it, which helped schools because we got more money at that time when it went on average A and B instead of average daily attendance. So the attendance is not a factor in how much money we obtain. And they even make it more complex. I don't understand it. In October, it's the first Monday in October. In February, it's February 1. That is totally indicative of school funding. I mean, why they're both not February 1st and October 1st, or the first Monday in October, I don't know. But it's just one of those little things that's always bothered me, and I write it down on our monthly enrollment so I can kind of remember myself. And then in the bottom, you see the PIR days. That's why one student is a little bit more than one student, because they give us credit for our 7 PIR days. So it's 180 plus 7 PIR, which are your parent-teacher conferences, some of your staff development the district does, teacher record day, gives you your 187. And that ends up showing us what our A and B is for the year, which is usually a little higher than our enrollment. Now, bottom right, you see the 3-year average. That was a change that they made with House Bill 63 back in fiscal year 2008. They then allowed you to do the 3-year average. Good news, but bad news. The good news is it tempers your decrease. Because if you're having a huge decrease and you take a 3-year average, you still get a little bit more money. Here it gave us some false revenues. Because the year that Spring Creek Choir was no longer part of our school district was the year they started the 3-year average. So we got credit for that Spring Creek Choir for 3 years after they no longer were enrolled in our school district, because they were counted as 1/2 average number belonging. And when we would get 100 to 120 in the choir out there, that was like 60 students times 6,000. $300,000 more we were getting because the choir was in our school district, and we put about $30,000 out for the program a year. Well, when they discontinued, all of a sudden, that became, like I said, the 60 students. Well, we got to carry them one more year. That's a 60 plus, you know that. So our 240 became 300, then it finally became 250, and then finally they eliminated. So I think we had maybe 4 years, plus 3 years more after we were still getting funded from the state, which has tempered our cuts. And that's why when you look around, everybody says, how has Thompson Falls managed not to have to go through the cuts that other school districts have done? Spring Creek Choir and a 3-year average tempered our loss of enrollment where we didn't have to face it. Now you get into maximum base. Base, you know, when they say what is base budget, everybody says in the business of education said it's 80% of your maximum. It used to be 80% of your maximum. Any math teacher can look up there and say it's a little more than 80% of your max now, because you're getting on your base budget 100% of your at-risk dollars, 100% of your quality educator dollars, 100% of your Indian ed money, and only 80% of your student entitlement, 80% of your basic entitlement. Everything else is paid at 100%. The only two that change when you go to your maximum budget is special ed at the bottom, which is 140%, And you'll see in the next slide that goes to 200, and then your student and basic entitlement go to 100%. So if you have $1, it used to be base budget was 80 cents. Now what it is, 81 cents, 82 cents, when you put in that other 100%, I don't know, but it's greater than 80%. You have to be between base and maximum to be equalized in Montana. The first year they passed the bill that put into, and I think it was House Bill 667, districts who were 60%, 75%, they automatically had to go to 80% next year. Were forced to go. Taxes went up. But they had to, because that was part of the school funding loss about 15 years ago. And so that's when they said equity is between 80% and 100%. You're equal. And yet if you have $1 million budget, $200,000 is a lot of money. And $800,000 cannot provide the same amount of services as $1 million can. But that under the definition under federal law, that does determine equalization, is to be between base and maximum. And then the maximum, the only difference, and I got them in red up on the slide, not on yours, is the 3 areas, entitlements and special ed, jump to 100%. The over base is usually by voter approval. And we'll get into how it's funded a little bit on a future slide, which will explain it a little bit more. But most of the districts in the state now are at maximum or over maximum. And that shows a district may adopt a budget that exceeds the maximum in limited cases. And the base is a minimum for a district, equalizes in there, and you can be disequalized in certain cases. We'll cover that. The highest budget with a vote required for an increase over base. District may adopt up to prior year budget, or ensuing, which is a new budget based on your enrollment, whichever is higher, with voter approval. Now, my estimation this year, as we look at it, and this will change, is that because we are decreasing in enrollment, somewhere in the neighborhood, I'm guessing, in the elementary district, the voters could approve up to $67,000 to spend, and approximately $52,000 at the high school with voter approval, because whichever is higher. Of course, our previous year's budget is higher than what it will be next year based on the rules of our enrollment. So that amount could go to the voters, whichever is higher, and that could be done in the spring. Now, the right has been, when this first started with, you could go to the voters for your previous year's budget. If it was higher, they said within 5 years, you have to get back to where you should be. They've done away with that. That was changed for the fiscal year 2008. So if you get it approved, you can continually go back to the voters and at least keep your previous year's budget with voter approval. And that voter approval is 100% funded by the local taxpayers. Now you can see there on the base, how the base is funded. Now, you notice up in that 35.3%, the reason that's shaded on the top half of that and white below is because it varies on the wealth of the district. If you are very, very poor district, the state is going to give you GTB, or guaranteed tax base. It's not coming from the local taxpayers directly, maybe through state income tax and back, but it's usually from the high taxable valuation across the state. They will reward it. So it isn't a definite. So you can't say all that up to the base is funded from the state and the local taxpayers. The state is going to fund more to the base budget of a district who is below the state average on taxable valuations. Now, this district used to get about $6,000 on both campuses for GTB. And then during the good times, when the money was going here, our elementary completely disappeared, and we were getting zero. Everything on the base budget, whatever a tax, whatever a mill raised is what we could use. The high school has always gotten something. whether it's being 5,000, 2,000, 3,000, just varies from year to year based on the total picture across the state. And you don't get that GTV till almost, sometimes August. You know, we look for it, they send out a preliminary when we get it in April, May, or June. But all the GTV does is determine local taxes. Has nothing to do with how much money we get. We're going to get the same amount of money, it's just who's footing the bill. Whether the local's going to foot more, or we're going to get more guaranteed tax base from the state. And then you can see all those other things, the quality educator, at-risk, Indian ed, that's all part of getting to the base budget.